Hi guys. Uh, so COVID-19 is taking the world by storm, and every day we are hearing uh, high number of cases. Uh, so today I'm going to give a talk on some of the unanswered questions regarding COVID-19 or areas in which the challenges are still going on. So let's start with some positivity. There has been a lot of negative and things that goes in our mind. What will be our future? Will corona affect us? If it affects us, how? What will be the outcome? Will I die or not? So the good news is that a monster is kind of getting uh, tamed. And initially, when it was first came up in the hospital settings, uh, there was roughly 6.5% of the admitted patients that used to die with uh, corona or COVID-19. But slowly with time, it has reached up to nearly 1%, which is kind of a great success, like only 1 out of 100 in the hospital. Now, if you imagine, people going into the hospitals are the one who are basically critically ill, are dying, and 99% is living, which is a great news. Now, that's something we should be happy about. No one knows why this rate is falling, and obviously there are something which can be assumed that the doctors are getting better in understanding the diseases and how to manage the patients. uh, Although no vaccine or drug has been much approved, but still some level of medications are were given now than in the past. um, so the other thing is, which comes to the mind, is the virus really losing its capacity to kill? Now, that might be the case, like, because since it is an RNA virus, and the mutations are very likely. Now, the mutations is not likely to favor the virus, which is going to be more deadly, but it is going to favor the virus which would ideally be spreading at a higher rate. And these two factors are at an inverse relationship. So it's likely that the virus is getting more virulent but less deadly. But still, we are not going to know um, until much later in the research why the death rate is decreasing very rapidly. Now, another big question that comes with the COVID-19 is nearly 80% of the people are asymptomatic, means they are not developing any symptoms. And even in the rest of the 20%, most of them are just having a mild cough and cold. Only kind of few percent of the patients develop severe form of disease and need hospitalization. And then also a very small fraction of the patients needs ICU, and still, but there is a mortality. And when we look at the number game, especially for the people who are aged or with comorbidity, the things is high. Now, the big question is, can we identify patients which are at risk, or in the other way, patient who poses no patients who don't, or sorry, or people who don't have any risk at all? So basically giving them a immunity passport and saying go out and work, because it's corona is basically killing our economy, and the economic damage is going to be long term. So that is another questions now, which is very hard to answer. We have been always going on, okay, if you have a diabetes, hypertension, if you are on ACE inhibitors, or if you are 60 plus, then you are more likely to get a severe form of COVID. But still, we are still looking for a molecular signature, like why some people have no symptoms at all, and why some people have so severe symptoms that they die also. So from the genetic perspective, people have just started the research and still it is at a very fancy stage. Like, are there genes contributing to it? Now, this precision life, they have come up with the initial model of 68 genes associated with a high risk of severe COVID-19. Uh, how accurate they are, that is a big thing, because one of the things that we see that COVID doesn't target young people, and if it is totally genes related, then they would be targeted. Rather, in most of the pandemics, it's a younger population that is targeted rather than the older population. But here in COVID-19, it is the reverse. So it might be more of an environmental factor, like how has that person earlier been exposed to the other form of less harmful coronavirus, the ones which causes cough and cold? It, it would be definitely genes related, but probably the immune profile and the overall health of the person might be more important than the genes. So there is a kind of a tight association between gene genotype and the phenotype and the various associated parameters in deciding who gets severe form of COVID-19 and who escapes it. So it is still uh, a big area of research, and probably we will find more answers as time goes on. Now, one of the big questions in the hospital setting is uh, predicting the clinical outcomes. And it happens to be that the patient starts deteriorating very fast, sometime in as less than in 24 hours, and there is a little scope to intervene. Uh, so, deciding which patient needs priority, which patients need to go to ICU, is a very challenging question. And even if they are moved to ICUs or some medications are to be incorporated, when is the right time to give it? So first, to understand that, we need to understand how the uh, COVID kills the patient. Now, the strangely, the virus is not killing the patient. That we know till now. It's our own immune system which goes on an overdrive, and that attacks the healthy lung cells, thereby leading to the total lung collapse. And in scientific terms, we call it as a cytokine storm. So it's our own immune cells which goes on an overdrive, and apart from killing the virus, it starts killing the healthy cells. But why some patients go into cytokine storm while other don't go is another big question. And in theory, there are medicines to slow down these cytokine storm, or to tell these are steroids which given will slow down the immune response of the body. But if given at the wrong time, then the body capacity to fight the virus will be hampered. So we can reduce the defense, but then the virus might be more overwhelming. But whereas if we don't reduce it, the cytokine secreted by our cells might kill the lungs and in general the patients. There has been a lot of recent studies going on, although we still don't have a clear picture. There's a interleukin 6 is supposed to be involved, C-reactive proteins and ferritin. Uh, there, there are some reports that the mutations in the gene PRF1, which basically codes for a protein which is known as perforin, and perforin is the protein which pokes the infected cells. Now, what happens is if that gene gets mutated, it might start poking the healthy cells. So mutations in these genes might have a hampered effect. Then mutation in a gene called LYST, and this is a garbage collector. So what it basically does, it collects the garbage generated in the fight of cytokines and our healthy cells uh, and the virus itself. So now steroids are generic medicines which reduce these all the types of cytokines. But if as we know that if we reduce it, the chances of virus damaging is more. Cap, we are basically lowering down our defense. So there are a lot of targeted knockdowns of specific cytokines, and they are already drugs which are used for arthritis and variety of diseases where the body own immune system is harming the body. um, and they are specific, they target specific cytokines. So there are a lot of drugs which are being studied to be repositioned for such type of situation where we know there is a cytokine storm and we want to reduce the cytokine storm, but we don't want the uh, our defense system to be weak enough, so mm, and not able to fight the disease. So we have to, it's a very much balancing act here, and that's where the early indicators of cytokine storm is important, and how the doctors can act at the very precise moment to monitor our own army not going into an overdrive. So here is an exercise for you, and if COVID-19 fascinates you, if virology fascinates you, you can do some study on how the virus and human lungs or human cells interact, and there is a lot of information now getting available. You can use cytoscape to build networks, so develop regulatory networks to predict cytokine storm. um, you can identify targeted therapies suitable for cytokine storm. You can develop model to identify at-risk group based on genotype and phenotype, and this can be translated in a diagnostic setup environment, like in a point of care diagnostics, where the cytokine profiling can be done, and judgment can be done. Is it time to give the medicines? Is it time to give a specific medicines, a targeted knockdown of interleukins, or just a steroid, or just leave it as it is? And now the big question comes, how will it all end? This this is everyone who is waiting for, like, when we will be back to pre-March era, where we used to go out freely everywhere, talk to people, interact with people. And will it ever come? That's a big question. So let's see. There is a term that you might have quite often heard in news and other things. That is the R value. And R value is typically important in epidemiology. So if one person spreads to more than one person, the R value will be more than one. But if two-person is uh, leading to the spread of only one person, the R value will be less than 1. So if the R value is in the positive direction, like if it is more than 1, it means one person is going to infect more than one person. And the number of infected daily infections will keep on increasing. So typically, like measles have a very high R value. It has a R value of 15. So one measles patient will infect 15 other healthy individuals. But for COVID-19, it is assumed to be around 4. Now the question is, anything above 1 means daily increase in the number of cases. Now many countries achieved a reduction in the value of R below 1 by imposing lockdowns. So in the left image, as you can see, this is what the graph will look like at different R values, like how the number of infections will keep on increasing. On the right hand side is a typical example of the UK, where the R value was 4, and then there were measures applied uh, to reduce mm, contacts, including closure of schools, social distancing, and then finally the major lockdown. And this brought the R values to less than 1. So in most of the European countries where they had been gone through extensive lockdown, extensive awareness campaigns, social distancing campaigns, we have a R value of less than 1. So which means the disease is going down, down, down. Now, still the economy has not been fully open. The schools has not been fully open. We don't know what will happen once the school starts opening up. We might again gain into a surge or we might not. That is the question that we will only know post September here. But again, the question comes, how will it end? Now, as we know, that it is very highly infectious, and within few months it has gone into every corner of the world. No areas is kind of immune to COVID-19. So there are two options to exit this scenario. One is vaccine, the other is herd immunity. Now, for vaccine, when vaccine comes, we don't know when it is going to come. When it comes, how effective it is, and how much it will be mass produced. So the first generation obviously will go to the healthcare workers, second lot will go to the senior citizens, and then it will be available to the common public. uh, but the Oxford one, which is kind of the promising one, still says it December as the timelines, and by the time it will reach to the common people, it might be another 4 to 6 months. Now, if the vaccine comes, then okay, the the lot of people will get vaccine, and it will be kind of the end of the corona. The reason being is end of this is because COVID-19 doesn't have a secondary host like other H1N1 and swine flu, which has a swine as a secondary flu, or bird flu, which has the chickens as a secondary host, so where they can keep on breeding. It COVID-19 doesn't have a secondary host as of now, mainly in domesticated settings. So it's likely it might disappear completely, or it might end up in an endemic. But the likelihood of it getting completely disappeared is high. Now, let's take the other situation, which is more likely that we don't get a vaccine uh, in time, I mean to say. So then we are heading to herd immunity. Now, in herd immunity, everyone is potentially exposed to the virus, and most of us will be at some point be exposed to the virus. So we have to get out from the hiding game, because if we get into the hiding game, the story will keep on going longer and longer and longer. So young people, young and healthy people, can continue with their work and help build up the herd immunity, while people at risk can go for cocooning and avoid the virus. Now, this is the diagram where each circle represents an individual. So initially, uh, see, this is green is immune, orange is yellow is non-immune, and red is infected. So initially, if you see, all of them will be yellow, but as people get infected with the virus and they get resistant, they will become immune, and that is shown in green. So when 60 to 70% of the patient will be exposed to the virus, the rest will be saved, and that is the point we call it herd immunity. Now see, this is the state of a herd immunity. The red is there. There are such susceptible peoples around, but the virus cannot directly cross that much distance, and the virus will disappear without finding a next host. There will be nothing left for it. So once 60% of the people are exposed, 60 to 70% of people are exposed, the virus will not be able to find uh, new host without an intermediate host, um, and the disease might disappear. So in my prediction, whether the vaccine comes or not, by the next March, we should be mostly free from COVID-19, and things will get normal. But finger crossed, we don't know what the future lies ahead for us. And thank you for listening to it. And if you have any questions, you are more than welcome.